Welcome to Budget Outlaws. My name is Andrew, and this is my very different Budget Outlaw. This is a 1956 Clipper custom hardtop with 29,000 original miles, and this one is bone stock. Well, it's a lot different than most other 56 American cars, and mainly because there wasn't very many of them built. This is actually built by Packard, and Packard separated out the Clipper line in 56 only. And Clipper was a sub-tier of their more senior lines, their executive and their Caribbean car. But it really was a fantastic car. Now, this was going after the mid-tier market in hopes of saving the Packard brand, but unfortunately that didn't happen. And 56 was the last year for the Packard. It was also the last year for the Clipper. So how many of these were made? Well, Clipper, there was about 18,000 Clippers made. In regards to this particular car, which is a custom hardtop, two-door hardtop, there was 1,466 made. Most people, when they want to buy a 50s car nowadays, they want to get like a Tri-5 Chevy, a 55, 56, 57 Chevy Bel Air, Nomad, 210, or other similar cars. And they want that because those are one of the most popular cars of the 50s era to modify due to a lot of different reasons, but there's a lot of parts for them. This car is cool just the way it is, and that's for three main reasons: the engine, the transmission, and the suspension. And we're going to go into that today.
Packard announces a new fine car series, the new Packard Executive. Here is a car with a special invitation to people of taste to enter the luxury car class, to own a fine car with a proud name, yet at a cost just above medium price lines. The Packard Executive is truly distinctive in its styling. Rich luxury appointments mark its interiors. Here, too, is riding perfection. Packard's exclusive Torsion Level Ride. In the Packard Executive, you get famous twin Ultramatic drive as standard equipment, and many other exclusive Packard engineering advances. Yes, the new Packard Executive is an invitation for you to enter the luxury car class now at a modest investment. See and drive the new Packard Executive today.
So Packard spent millions in development of this car. The transmission alone, they spent $7 million in development to be able to build something that was lighter and handled more power than the automatic transmissions of the day. This is basically a Ultramatic, is what Packard called it. It's a two-speed transmission, and it used lots of different valves and whatnot. But the biggest thing that made this transmission important and different was it was the first transmission that was completely made out of aluminum. That saved about 90 pounds. And on a car this big and heavy, that's a lot of weight. So, was it able to handle the power? Well, that leads us into the next thing that this car was special for, and that was the V8. So let's take a look at that motor. So Packard spent big money developing this V8 engine. Their iconic straight 8 was due for a refresh, and they had taken that engine as far as they could. And this was their replacement. They had a 320 cubic inch V8, a 352, which is in this car right here, and a 374. The 320 was put in the junior line, and the Clipper line, the lower end Clipper lines. The 352 was in the 55 senior line, the executive, and the Caribbean. And then Also, the in 56 they put it in the Clipper, and then the 374 was put in the Senior, Executive, and Caribbean 456 only. The 320 made 225 horsepower, the 352 made 275 horsepower, and the Big Daddy 374 made 310 horsepower, making them one of the most powerful engines in Detroit. Now, the interesting thing about these engines is that Packard built them with a 5-inch bore spacing between the cylinders, making it so that they could build the engines bigger. Up to 500 inches was planned for this engine. So it's interesting that they spent so much time and money in development for making this what could have been essentially a big block. Very interesting. And it goes pretty good. This is a very pretty car. And I particularly love the color, the taillights, and then the little things about the car on the body. If you look at the front end, there's one thing that you notice primarily, and that's the ample amount of chrome that Packard used. The headlights are wrapped in chrome. There's a solid piece of chrome all the way from one end to the other end, and the entire grille from one indicator to the other is just chrome. It is a very good looking front end. The other thing that's very good looking about the front end is this bumper. And they have these Dagmars that were called so because of a very famous actress of the time that, let's move on. The other thing that you notice is this hood ornament. Now, Packard had a lot of different hood ornaments throughout their entire line of cars, but one of the common themes that they had was either a woman or somebody holding out a globe in the front of the car. And if you look at this hood ornament, you kind of get that sense that there is something holding this globe all the way out to the front of the car. We see the Clipper insignia here, and then the only real logo for Clipper, which is this lovely ship wheel. This is used many times throughout the car, and it is a fantastic looking logo. Let's go ahead and move on. One of the things that differentiates the Clipper line from the Senior line is the Senior line had a very masculine hood, and it had this almost hood scoop that went all the way across. It was non-functional. It was entirely made out of lead. So it added an unknown, I don't know, somebody does, amount of weight to the front end of the car, which was already very, very heavy. So I like the Clipper better. Let's go ahead and keep moving around. If we look down the middle of the car, we have this body line that separates us, and in this car we have this gorgeous cream on the top, and then the body line is also of the cream. The main portion of the body is this lovely teal. Now, this car wasn't stock this color. This was a factory color combination, just not for this particular car. Somebody painted it, and I think they did a good choice. So we see on the front these red steel wheels with these lovely hubcaps that, again, have this Clipper logo. And also the custom badge up front. Now, if we keep moving back, we see this mirror that doesn't really do anything. It's almost impossible to see out of. That one does something. This one, almost nothing. A lovely curved windshield that whenever you look through the front, it kind of warps your perspective a little bit. It's very interesting, but very cool. As we keep going back, we see what makes this a hardtop, and that is there is no B-pillar. The B-pillar is technically back here, but instead of there being a post right here, it's completely open all the way through. as if you're in a convertible, but in reality you have this lovely hard top. Keep going back and we have this lovely body extension for the rear, and it's huge. It's absolutely huge. My arm span is 6 foot and it's larger than 6 foot. Keep going back, we see this huge chrome that is absolutely lovely, and it shows us again the Clipper logo. And finally we get to the back of the car, which is arguably one of the prettiest parts of the car. Definitely one of my favorites. And just look at it. It's gorgeous. We have, again, the ship logo on the back, these bumpers that suck into the body, and the exhaust completely encapsulated by the rear bumpers. But most importantly, we have these taillights. These taillights are absolutely gorgeous. And they are one of the most famous taillights for hot rodders. They would use these taillights and put them in some of the coolest projects. But by far, the taillights are my favorite. Now, we come back to this logo right here. And you might wonder, how do you get into this car? How do you get into the trunk? Well, that logo actually does something. That's steering wheel. The center part, there's this piece right here that flips around, gives us access to the keyhole, and then we can also turn this to open up the trunk. Speaking of trunk, we have a very healthy trunk that can fit a lot of stuff. But in reality, today it fits a nice little picnic basket, spare tire, some tools, and some nice chairs. We can see that it's carpeted and it has this lovely houndstooth pattern. One of the things I don't like about it is this side. They're made out of cardboard. Most of this is fabric, but this side piece is made out of cardboard, so it just doesn't stand the test of time. That's all right. It still is nice. To lock it, we turn this back, give it a healthy close. That's the body of a 56 Clipper. So absolutely one of the coolest things about this car is the suspension. And the reason why it's cool is because instead of coil springs and leaf springs, it has torsion bars.
A new automotive suspension system created by Packard and using full-length torsion bars has been designed to take you smoothly, safely over even roughest roads. Ordinary leaf and coil springs are eliminated. Instead, an upward force on the front wheel is transmitted by a twist of the torsion bar into a downward pressure on the rear wheel, which, being on the road, can't go down. So the reaction goes upward, keeping the car level, floating the car over the bump. This same thing happens when the rear wheel goes over a bump. And that's how Torsion Level Ride works.
And those torsion bars run the entire length of the car from back there all the way to roughly here, and from the front to roughly right about here. And they're connected. And then they're connected to the middle of the car via what's called a compensator motor, an electronic motor that you just heard. And what that does is it raises and lowers the suspension depending on how much weight is in it, so that it makes sure that it's always riding perfectly level.
Clipper's Torsion Level Ride. When lots of folks get into any car and pile in luggage in the back of the car, the rear end sinks down mighty far. But watch what happens in the Clipper car. The levelizer motor starts turning the bar, and right away up comes the car. That's Clipper's Torsion Level Ride. Don't need no springs, got torsion bars. Don't want no springs, got torsion torsion bars. Throw away those springs. Got torsion bars, got clippers. Torsion Level Ride.
The other thing that it does is it makes sure that the front and the rear are connected. So whenever it goes over bumps, everything stays level. It is one of the best riding 50s cars I have ever been in. And it rivals cars of today too. I really, really love this suspension. So, enough talk about this car. Between the powerful V8, the very light transmission, and this very, very interesting suspension, let's get in it and go for a drive. Come on.
I'm actually going to interrupt myself, and we're going to go over the interior real quick. So we have, the very first thing we notice is this dashboard. It's a gorgeous dashboard that's got a metal encasing. This is black painted, depending on what color the car was. It had a complementary color for the interior. And we see this lovely mesh backdrop for the dash, encapsulated by chrome. Everything in here is chrome. And with the sun, I don't really notice this. There's a little bit of glare from the dashboard, but nothing crazy. It actually works really well. We see these gorgeous instruments that have a green backdrop with white stripe, right little details, and the lettering and the numbers are gold. It's absolutely gorgeous. And then finally, we have these little knobs that are used for either lights or antenna, wiper. This is for the lighter. We have a speaker and the radio here. The radio works pretty good for time frame. We have a clock. And finally, on the dash, we have this lovely Clipper logo with our wheel and our custom design. And we have this lovely felt-lined glove box with a light. And we can't forget, what are these? Well, it's an ashtray. There are two ashtrays. You might think, oh, maybe they're the vents for the defroster or the air conditioning. Well, this is the air conditioning here. It's aftermarket. The defroster vents are either under the dash or in this little area right here. They work pretty good. They keep the car pretty warm. And there are four little levers here that designate where everything goes and how much. And they still work to this day. 29,000 original miles. It's amazing. The seats are really comfortable. They're this gorgeous design, and they split in the front, and the rears are solid. There's lots of room in here. There's absolutely lots of room. You can fit 6 people in here comfortably. Finally, if we look up, we see one of my favorite features of this car, and that's the headliner. It's got this perforated leather and these chrome bars that just hold it in place, and it just looks really classy. Absolutely love it. All right, I've taken enough of our time. Let's go for that drive.
All right, let's go for a drive. So how does it drive? It drives really nice. The suspension, the V8, transmission's okay, but in reality, this is such a lovely cruising car. It just glides over small undulations on the road and bumps. In fact, it does some of the most interesting things I've ever seen a car do when it goes over a speed bump. the car will bounce, like go over the speed bump, and then as it's coming off the speed bump, it'll just kind of stay level, and then slowly it'll drop down as the rear just kind of goes whoop, and it is just gorgeous out here.
The handling. Let's not talk about the handling. Actually, the handling is pretty good for a big American car. The torsion bars do a really good job of keeping the car relatively level, and the limits are low. That's just the way it is with old style bi-splies and a really heavy car with soft suspension. Alright, we're going to go around a 25 mile an hour turn at 25 miles an hour and see what it's like. Bad. So what's it like to drive on the road? It's really nice, at least for a 50s car. It really glides over the road and bumps and undulations. And we're going over a pretty potholy, patched road right now, and it's rather nice. There's not a lot to be said. This wouldn't be any worse of a ride. In fact, it's probably a better ride than most modern cars. The seats are a little bit bouncy, but aside from that, it's nice. It's amazing what a car of this time period is like in comparison to a modern car. A modern car is relatively stiff, and it just doesn't float. Older cars floated. I heard the term float like a Cadillac, and this is that time period. And granted, there's a little bit of dead spot in the steering, but in reality, it's just cruises and drives so nicely. You might be curious about what that 275 horsepower actually feels like. Well, it's pretty slow. Let's see what it does 0 to 60. Here we go. Alright, there's 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60. So, by today's standards, it's relatively slow. But in reality, this was one of the quickest cars on the road in '56. The interesting thing about the power band is that after 60, it doesn't just slowly creep up to 70, 80, 90, 100. It actually continues on that same pace and kind of picks up pace when it gets to about 75 or 80. It's interesting. The power band is definitely a little bit higher up there, but because of the transmission, it really doesn't do a very good job of utilizing that power band. But is it enough? Yes. As Rolls-Royce would say, it's sufficient. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this, because I've really enjoyed making this. And this car has been a dream of mine for quite some time. And I didn't know it until I found it, but this is so much what I wanted from a 50s classic car. Now, granted, I would love a hot rod, but that's a completely different kind of car. It's not something that you can really take everywhere. It's not something you can take a family with. I bought this so that I can make memories with my family, and we've had it for a little bit of time, and we've made some memories. This has been a fantastic car. Absolutely love it. And I can't wait to share all those memories with you, and I hope you guys enjoy all the future content we're going to build with this car. But if you want to see that, please like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks again.